DFS. It doesn't get much sicker than this. We're going to talk through all the cash game core. We're going to talk through the stacks. We're going to talk through everything that feels good and bad about this slate. Plenty to get into. Let's go. So yes, our cover boy, it is Geno Smith, and Geno Smith is somebody in particular I feel very good about. So much of his slate comes back to who is motivated to play, who has a reason to really go out there and achieve something. And I'm much more interested in the teams who have something to achieve than I am in the individual players who are hunting down big bonuses or, like you've seen people this morning talking about the fact that Odell Beckham is a few catches away from like 250 grand. The Ravens paid Odell Beckham 15 million to win a Super Bowl. They're not playing him. He's not even playing, and yet people are still talking about the fact that he could go out there and chase that incentive. We've got to be realistic with the incentives that we're actually taking into account. And it's worth remembering that these incentives, we're not getting one over on the bookies. We're not getting one over on anyone. Everyone's aware of them, and everyone's already factoring that into the cost. So try not to double count this weekend. There are 6 early games. 1 game over 42 points. There are 7 late games, one of the rare weeks where red zone is distributed nicely. And in the early games, you can see Panthers, Buccaneers. The Bucs need that one to win the division and get into the playoffs. Bengals, Browns, nothing to play for. Plenty of players being rested. Lions, Vikings. Vikings need a win and some other stuff to happen. Lions need... they need the win to have any chance of a 2 seed, but it's a bit of an outside shot, and I'm a bit wary about how much Lions players could be rested. Patriots, Jets, nothing worth talking about. Saints, Falcons, both teams could win the division with wins and other stuff going their way, but it kind of relies on the Panthers beating the Bucs, which doesn't feel likely. Titans, Jags. That's a game which the Jags need to win the division and get in. So it's, it could be Mike Vrabel try to spoil the party, but I do like that environment as well. Cardinals, Seahawks, that's a game which I'm really focused on. And then Packers, Bears. Again, the Bears are playing with a bit more fire in the belly than most teams who are knocked out, and they get a chance to knock the Packers out of the playoffs by beating them. So I think there's definitely more to be had from that game than some other games where there's a team who were eliminated. Raiders, Broncos, not much interest. Chargers, Chiefs, very little interest. Giants, Eagles, very wary about how much the Eagles are going to play in this one. I don't mind taking a few shots at it, but they're not players I'd be considering for cash game builds this week. Then Niners, Rams. It's pretty much just going to be a preseason game. Both teams playing as many of the backups as they possibly can. Commanders, Cowboys. There were some reports today talking about how the Cowboys have been reminded this week that they can't possibly let happen to them what happened to the 2019 Patriots, where in week 18 or 17, whatever it was back then, the Patriots lost the game against the Dolphins where they were heavily favored, and they ended up then having to play on wildcard weekend and got knocked out by the Titans. I think the Cowboys want to come out here and they want to smash. There's reports around Washington that some of the veterans on the Commanders side are looking to potentially rest this weekend, which seems kind of mind-blowing for a team who, should be going out and playing for one last week to try and help their head coach have one last good memory of his time with the Commanders. But it definitely doesn't seem to be particularly good. Let's get on to the rest of them there. Reminder, this is kind of quintessential late swap weekend. There's so much information you could take from the early games to then decide what to do on the late games. If you're building your stacks around the late games and you want to play one piece of chalk from the early game, if that chalk fails, then you need your later lineup to be even more on the differential side if you want to have any chance of taking down one of these tournaments. Good chalk, bad chalk. CD Lamb, 35%. Already talked about how I think that this is a smash spot for the Cowboys. I think they go out there and just absolutely annihilate the Commanders. And we've been targeting the Commanders' passing defense all year, and they haven't been able to stop anyone. Pierre Strong at 25%, playing for the Browns, in case you didn't know, against the Bengals. The Bengals' run defense has been bad all year, and now in a meaningless game, I don't think that they're going to be up to a lot. Justin Jefferson, 25%. I think, you look back at what Nick Mullins did last time he played. He looked like he was fine with just going with the idea of, fuck it, Justin Jefferson down there somewhere and just launching the ball. And that's great. It's really good for Justin Jefferson's value. And I talked in the write-up about how the Lions aren't stopping many people on defense right now. Christian Kirk, 30%. He's only $3,000. It's an absolute misprice from DraftKings, and I feel really good about that as long as there are no negative reports between now and kickoff. So it's one to monitor, but yeah, I'd definitely be okay with that one. I think I'd prefer to do it in cash or in tournaments where I'm double stacking Trevor Lawrence. Bad chalk, Aaron Jones. I mean, the Bears' defense has been good against the run for a little while now. It's just not the same Bears team that we're used to seeing. And I think that you can look at how they've played, how few yards they've given up to running backs. And Aaron Jones has looked good, but I don't think that I particularly want to lean into that here, particularly when, and we can talk more about as we go on, the Bears are missing their top cornerback this weekend, which means that it's going to be much easier to pass on them than it is to run on them. So, yeah, I feel stronger about the passing game than the running game. Chargers defense, 20%. Yes, I know they are playing backup Chiefs, but the Chargers defense hasn't been good at all. They haven't been particularly turning the ball over. They haven't been particularly good from any perspective. So playing them at 20% just seems like you're asking for a problem to me. And then Chris Olave, 15%. I don't mind Chris Olave. I think on the right builds, it's kind of fine. But the Falcons have been really good taking away wide receiver ones this year. We've talked about it a lot. I know you're probably bored of hearing me saying it, but they put AJ Terrell on him, and they're okay with shadow coverage as much as any team does play shadow coverage. And then they'll also bring Jesse Bates down to help out. That duo is pretty much as good as any duo in the league when it comes to taking away a top option. Getting into the cash game core, for me, there are three quarterbacks who I really want to build around. I don't think that there are too many players that I want to take shots on at quarterback here. There's a lot of cheap options at quarterback, and there's a lot that kind of look okay. But I think there's enough savings elsewhere that I would rather prioritize paying up for Dak, Geno, or Justin Fields, and then looking to save money at running back. I think that you could go with the first three here, Pierre Strong, Jordan Mason, Zamir White, and use those as your first three. Add one of the quarterbacks we've already seen, and then pay up at wide receiver and hope that the volume really kicks in there. On a week where we don't know what we don't know, projectable volume is kind of key here. We know certain running backs are going to see large volume. Zamir White is going to see a lot. Kenneth Walker's going to see a lot, and he's playing an Arizona defense that's just awful against the run. Pierre Strong looks to be, according to all the reports out of Cleveland, the massive favorite to see a large workload there. And then Jordan Mason seems to be the massive favorite in San Francisco because apparently the Niners are keen to keep Elijah Mitchell rested as possible. So there is definitely a chance that these are the guys that are going to make cash lineups work. Wide receiver. So, yeah, we're paying up CD Lamb, Christian Kirk, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jaden Reed. Christian Kirk is obviously the one who opens up even more salary. So if you wanted to get to Lamb, Jefferson, Amon-Ra, I don't even know if that's possible. I've not tried that yet myself, but you'd probably have to have Kirk in there and punt tight end as well as going with a couple of running backs. from the cheap range. Jaden Reed, really like the matchup. Really think that with the Bears missing their top cornerback, it's going to be a better matchup than it looks like on paper for him. Tight end, Noah Gray down at 2,500, the stone minimum that tight ends get to. I mean, he just fills in for Travis Kelce. We've seen it before. There's been odd games where Kelsey's missed out and Gray runs a lot of the routes. So I'd be fine with taking a punt on him. Trey McBride, if you've got the money to pay up, is fine. I have no problem with that whatsoever. We talked on Thursday about how it felt like a decent bounce back spot for Trey McBride after a couple of quiet games. Seahawks very much middle of the pack against the tight end position. Johnny Munn for the Vikings, FYI. When TJ Hawkinson wasn't out there last week, I believe he was running the most routes out of everyone apart from Justin Jefferson. He was ahead of Jordan Addison. For some reason, they just prefer having Josh Oliver in that kind of pass blocking role. And it was Johnny Munt who was out there getting all the looks. And we know that Nick Mullins is going to throw the ball a lot. So I feel good about that. It's also worth mentioning that the Lions are a tough matchup for the running backs. So that's why I'm kind of staying away from Ty Chandler and just leaning into the pass game. And then Darren Waller. Eagles can't defend anything. It remains to be seen how much of the game the Eagles starting lineup even plays. So don't mind taking shots at Darren Waller, who's seen some kind of steady volume for the last 3 games. Getting into GPP stacks. This one I put in the Discord yesterday. And this is the kind of approach that I want to be heavy on this week. Finding one game that feels like it has a chance to hit its over-under and surpass that, and just really leaning heavily into it. So Geno, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith and Jigba, DK Metcalf, and then 2 Cardinals players. You can mix this up. You can change various bits of it. You could change the running backs that I've got in there. But you see, it's all making everything work, the kind of things which we preach all the time. We've got some chalk running back, some differential stacks. We're coming right around the 125% total ownership, which is so often where winning lineups come in. We've got multiple players under 10%. And yeah, it ticks a lot of boxes for me for the kind of single entry, reasonable size contest that I like to play. So I'll be playing that somewhere tomorrow. Next up, again, leaning into the idea of, okay, which teams do I really think can go out and score well tomorrow? The Dak mega stack. Jake Ferguson, somebody who the matchup doesn't seem ideal, but if the Commanders are going to be resting various veterans and older players, then what hope is there? And I think, yeah, you can just lean into what the Cowboys do well. And Jake Ferguson, I think, leads all players in red zone targets, definitely leads all tight ends. So if you're thinking, again, is that one which is going to work in terms of, are you going to have the salary to be able to pay up? This one, you can see down at the bottom, the total product ownership, 151%. That's definitely a bit chalkier than I'd like, but I just put this together quickly to kind of show you can definitely make it work with the salary that we've got available. This one I added Pierre Strong, Jordan Mason, Drake London, Zamir White. Just getting away from one of those running backs, possibly even Zamir White, would help you get back down to sort of like 125, 130% ownership. Just finding another differential wide receiver there instead. Next stack, Justin Fields, DJ Moore, Jaden Reed, and Tucker Kraft. Obviously, this one is slightly less interesting if Luke Musgrave's able to play. If Luke Musgrave's able to play, it really kind of muddies the waters a bit. I'd also be interested in taking shots on Christian Watson if he plays. The Packers, they need the win. They need all their players out there. And I think that there's definitely a chance that Christian Watson could be out there. And if he is, we know he's the kind of player that leads to tournament wins. I wouldn't play him in cash games ever, but in tournaments, absolutely. DJ Moore's just been straight money. He's pissed off. He didn't make the Pro Bowl. Justin Fields, this is him trying to keep his job in Chicago. This is him trying to wreck the Packers party. Absolutely believe that this stack and this game, there's plenty of shootout potential, particularly with both sides being beaten up at cornerback. Let's see. Next one. It is Trevor Lawrence, Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk are 3 square at 3K, and then DeAndre Hopkins. So Lawrence is banged up, and that's the only part of this that really worries me in this one. But Calvin Ridley's been balling, leads the team in red zone red zone targets, red zone touchdowns. Christian Kirk, we know that he can be a complete volume hog. The Titans are awful against the wide receiver position, have been all year. But then the Jags have also been pretty bad against the wide receiver position this year. And DeAndre Hopkins is chasing some incentives. I think he has a chance to add up to about 750 grand in total. So that's kind of one of the rare ones where I'm like, okay, that probably is noteworthy and probably something which he might be looking to do. And then last one, the kind of more bargain basement stuff. Tyrod Taylor, Darius Slayton, who balled out last week, best wide receiver performance by a Giant all year, Darren Waller, and then AJ Brown. There's not going to be any Devonta Smith, so things really open up for AJ Brown. He should see monster volume here. And I think this is one where, okay, yes, the Eagles might rest him in the second half, but he has every chance to be at like 160 yards and 2 touchdowns by the time they pull him from the game. So I'd be fine with that. And we already talked about Darren Waller being a nice play this weekend. So that's your Week 18 DFS Clinic. Next weekend, playoffs, baby. It's going to be back to usual service. The DFS deep dive will be more extensive, more detailed. In terms of this weekend, I am around most of tomorrow. And if you have any questions, tag me in the Discord. I will try and put a few things into the Discord for tonight's 2-game slate, but it doesn't look the most interesting to me. I think I'd rather look at the showdowns rather than try to play both games at once. But yeah, this is it. Last week of the season. Let's go out with a good win. If you need anything, you know where I am.